Well, you know, growing up in the Southside of Chicago, I had a great family. My dad wasn't in my life, but I had great role models. My grandfather, my uncles, my brother. I pinned him as my first black superhero. I call him the winless lawyer because whenever I would get in trouble, he would try to plead the case to my mom, and he never won a case. My mom, she was the disciplinary definitely in the house. He protected me from a lot, especially out in the streets of Chicago. You know, I played junior college basketball in Chicago on a scholarship, and I was on my way to a game, and I got held at gunpoint, you know, at the wrong place, the wrong time. A few gang members came over to me and was trying to shake me down to see what neighborhood I was from. Even went to as far as putting a revolver to my chest and cocking a hammer back. You know, his peers was telling him to pull the trigger and shoot me. And luckily, this guy that lived in my neighborhood, he lived in my building, actually was a gang member, and he was in a wheelchair. He was shot in the back from gang activity. And he happened to just be wheeling by. And he looked at me and he called me by my brother's name. And when he realized it was me, he told them to leave me alone, that I was good people. My Uncle Richard, he said, you need to get off these streets and get out of here because the good guy is the one that always stick the bullet to the temple. About 2 months later, I enlisted in the Navy.
And you were enlisted, and what was your rank enlisted?
I was, of course, come in as E1. I burrowed through the ranks rather quickly. You know, I made E5, and you know, I jumped from the Navy into the Army 1 Officer Procurement Program.
And what was your interest that sparked you in that direction of the Warrant Officer Corps?
You know, I had plenty of opportunity to be an officer in the Navy, and there wasn't a lot of black officers in the Navy. The ship I was on, the Cape St. George, I think we had 2 black officers. And I didn't like the way that they were treated, per se. I just kept going on with my career, and I came across a couple warrant officers in the Navy. 3, as a matter of fact. One is Chief Warrant Officer Hawk. We called him Hang 'em High Hawk because he was the UCMJ guy. Everything was UCMJ. And then Zebedee Clark. He was the first African-American warrant officer that I ever come across. He was from South Carolina, and he was very intelligent, and he was very stern. And then the final one would be Warrant Officer Agee. He was a great guy. I used to watch him and the respect that he had, and I said, hey, I want to be a warrant officer. But to be a warrant officer in the Navy, you had to be an E7 with no less than 12 years in. So I felt I was ready at an E5 to make a jump. So I found out the Army was looking for sailors to cross over into the Army's transportation watercraft field. I found out about it, I met the requirements, and I took advantage of it. The Transportation Corps was established in 1942, and there was never a African-American CW5 until 2014, and I became it. So first African-American to reach that rank in the Transportation Corps. The military is a catch pan for the social, economic injustices that African-Americans come across. And sometimes we need an avenue to have some kind of economic value to be able to take care of our families, right? So, you know, that is a glad path to do that, but it's a double-edged sword because not only are we experiencing injustice in the street and losing our lives, we are into a bigger world environment so we can also lose our lives as well fighting for our country.
So you've achieved the Warrant Officer Corps from W1 to W5. Do you care to explain at each one of those pinnacle ranks what your role was, reaching up to CW5?
When I crossed over to the Army, I didn't even know how to march. The lingo, the way the Army does business, fight wars, totally clueless. So I came in like, you know, I did when I was 19 years old when I joined the military. So, you know, I had to learn, you know, every step of the way. And then when I graduated my procurement program for warrant officer, I went to my basic course as a W1. From W1 to W3, that probably was about 8-9 years of just learning my trade, understanding what I needed to do, how to talk to my leaders, how to address myself to a brigade, battalion, and a company commander. So when I got to W4, I was seasoned. I understood who I was and what I brought to the table as a warrant officer, and I became an advisor to full bird colonels. And hey, chief, tell me what's wrong with the boat. And I can explain it to them without going into the weeds. And when you make the rank of W5, you are a Master 1 officer. That means you know pretty much everything that's going on with your MOS, from personnel to different platforms of vessel, to manning, to structure, to everything. And you're there to advise generals, and they look for you to give them sound advice for them to make a decision. So, you know, for those out there, from that W1 to W3, if you're doing anything other than learning your job and your trade, you're wrong, right? Learn your job and your trade, and you become an advisor to those who need advising, and to those decision makers who can make the decisions for the people that's coming up under you.
There are some that would say, of course you're going to do your best, but why do African Americans in particular have to be better than their counterparts? Why can't they just be based on their merit?
Right. So let's go back in time. So let's look at Black Wall Street. You have to be in that mind frame in order to make it. Because we was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we had our own community, and we wasn't bothering anybody. But they came and they wiped it out. That is the foundation of who we are and how we came since, you know, kings and queens in Africa all the way through slavery. I just think that is the way it is. And racism, in my opinion, is not going anywhere.
How did you excel through the promotional system that is for everyone?
I was always in a selfless service mode. It wasn't always about me. It wasn't always about my OER or my next school and so on and so forth. It was about what my leaders, wanted to be. What were their dreams? What did my soldiers wanted to do? Did they want to be a warrant officer? Did they want to be a high-ranking NCO? And I would put myself behind them and be their best cheerleader. And in turn, when you do that work for them, then they'll turn around and work for you and help you go through the ranks without even noticing it. So I always put people first. And I think that was probably my number one. If you're an NCO aspiring to be a warrant officer, don't forget the values that got you to that NCO level, because it's very important, right? Warrant officer is all about technical, right? Being an advisor, but leading people, taking care of soldiers is instrumental within the warrant officer corps. So don't ever make it about yourself, make it about everyone else, and then it'll be about you in the end. If you look at the leadership style of transformational, servitude, and transactional, I would say transformational. Basically, I take the strengths of a soldier and I will highlight their strengths. And then at the same time, you focus on the strengths, and then you can tweak their weaknesses in order to make them strengths. I was ranked number one warrant officer from 2012 to 2017 out of 60, out of 54 by different battalion and brigade commanders and general officers, because I took care of my people. It wasn't me. It take a village. It was my soldiers. They're making sure that I was well equipped to do what I need to do.
How has the Warrant Officer Corps, the Navy, the Army, developed you into the entrepreneur, the author, the contractor, dare I say, that you are today?
I think the work ethic comes from the Turner-Watson clan, right? I think the military helped scope that. In the years of leading, advising, different experiences, different cultures, I've been around the world and you take all those ingredients and you put it into a cup and you add the hot water and you get a person who's always looking to achieve.
How do you give back to your community?
I still mentor the warrant officers that's within the Transportation Corps. Of course, I have an open door policy. I am responsible for the first African-American female in the Transportation Corps, CW5 Garnetta Mosley, who's retiring in about 2 months. I was very instrumental in that. I like to create jobs for us, trucking, independent contractor. I'll be hiring people, later this year to fill slots. And I like to do, art pieces, like what we have before us. So I like to write books about great Black stories, Black movement, things of that nature to help people think outside the box on the culture and where we need to go. I would say, coming from the Southside of Chicago, a person who hated school, if I can do it, they can do it. There's never a direct road to success. The road to success is full of potholes, broken glass, nails, any hurdles that you can think of. and just take one hurdle at a time, and always keep your mind on the end goal at hand. You know, if success was an easy road, everybody would be millionaires and successful, but it's not. And the universe already have a predestined determination on what you are. How you go about that and what decisions you make in your life is going to determine the road to get there. But you'll get there. Never quit. And just when you think about quitting, don't.